2008, a law critics say threatens ownership of customary lands.
However, the Samoan government is dispelling any such fears despite the concerns. But as Tangaloa Tele Osonio Kisene reports, many of those worried about this issue will take much more convincing.
This may look like just another day in paradise, but for these Matai in the village of Sili, smiles disguise a great fear that one day the place they call home could be snatched from underneath them. Their fears have been sparked by a new law called the Land Titles Registration Act. It was passed last year. It's complex, but they think the law will drastically change the ownership of customary land, with the power over the land being able to be held by one person. Around 18% of land in Samoa is freehold or saleable land. The remaining 82% is listed as customary land, which is governed by the Matai. But the new act could change all that. It's introduced the Torrens system to replace the deed system as the way of registering land and showing ownership, a system Samoa's Prime Minister says will be easier and cheaper to administer, clearly defining ownership, and he's adamant that it only applies to freehold land.
Under the Torrens system, which is a system that is also adopted by New Zealand and Australia. Once you are registered in the registry, it's your land.
It's this registration system that's giving cause for concern because it allows ownership of land to be held by an individual. Some believe it extends beyond freehold land.
Once you start to drag in the customary lands into a Torrens system, it exposes the very last hold of customary ownership of that land to investors, and it exposes them to having them to become collaterals and to allowing them to become mortgage.
But the government says that people have nothing to fear when it comes to their customary land. They say the new Torrens system and the registration of customary lands are like oil and water.
The Torrens system applies only to freehold land. The confusion here relates to the registration of customary land in the register.
Under clause or section 9 of the Land Titles Registration Act, customary land itself is not part of the Land Titles Registration Act.
On the surface, things might look clear, but Nanai Dr. Yati Yati thinks the new law is dangerous and has written a paper highlighting the damage it could cause.
If you read the Act carefully, there are a lot of problems, a lot of grey areas that could be exploited and down the road could lead to some form of alienation of customary land in Samoa. Certainly it could be very problematic for customary land tenure in Samoa.
But what is this Torrens system that everyone's talking about? In a nutshell, the person whose name is registered as the owner of a piece of land is by law just that. And under sections 9.1 and 9.2 of this Act, current and new leases of customary lands are to be registered under the new system. In short, customary land that used to belong to everyone, once registered, belongs to one person.
The Torrens system doesn't reflect our customary principles of ownership. Under the Torrens system, you'll have a certificate of title, and whoever's name is on that title is, to all the world, the owner of that piece of land.
No one person has a right to make decisions on that land. It's the collective family that does make the decision.
Despite assurances from government, what most critics worry about is the alienation of their lands. They fear that this Land Titles Registration Act is a way to get around protections built into Samoa's constitution.
There are only two circumstances that the Constitution foresees by which land can be alienated, and that's for leasing or licensing. But that's only temporary. The land will be returned to its customary landowners once the leasing process has expired.
If land is leased for 100 years or so, there is a generation that will miss out on having control or a say over that land. Now, is that alienation?
Critics argue the new law is part of a series of government reforms being driven by foreign banking institutions and investors who've pumped millions into the country. Land reform to them means access to the bulk of Samoa's customary lands for development, which in turn means destruction of Samoa.
There's no free lunch, and Samoa has to give something. And I think we're starting to see that in land right now.
The government is very much behind the foreign investors in terms of their initiatives to change our land tenure system. So I'm pleading, for the sake of our people in Samoa, that we really need to. It's a crisis situation for us, and we need to save our customary lands.
But the man in charge says this is all just speculation and that customary lands are well protected by law.
Despite our many explanations, of course, those who oppose want to become lawyers as well.
But for the Matai in the village of Sili, they have little faith in the Prime Minister's assurances.
Fangua ia umia sa loko kang Samoa. O sa ola ine ia fangua la ia kau palang le fa kau. Te la mai ai vai kele ma falingiu, falongiu. Fangua nga kau nga ia la kau.
Such an important issue for Samoans. I guess we only need to look at the problems in the region to see how easily our people can become displaced from their lands.
So true, and only time will tell. And like most things to do with land, beware of the fine print.
We'll keep track of further developments in this story.